morning will start now. Welcome. Good morning to everyone. Welcome to Pandesal Forum here at 84-year-old Kamuning Bakery Cafe. We have a very important topic today and very important speaker and reactors in our panel. The topic today is very important. It's the unresolved issue of the comfort women, survivors, and victims of World War II atrocities. We will invite our speaker and our reactors to each one give an opening statement. Then after the opening statement, we'll invite the media to ask your questions. Media here and media watching via Zoom and others via Facebook Live. I'll mention the guests muna today, and later on I'll introduce one by one before their opening statement. This is an important issue kasi unresolved issue, and there's a recent United Nations panel which said the Philippine government should give justice to the comfort women, victims, and survivors. And our speakers today and the actors will update us what has happened ever since. And the phenomenon, the very sad phenomenon of comfort women memorials and statues lost or stolen will be discussed by them. I'll mention first the speakers, then one by one I will introduce. Of course, we have from Seattle, Washington, an intellectual, Miss Lila Shahani. I'll introduce her later on in more detail. Of course, the respected, courageous three defenders of comfort women victims, Miss Terresita Ang Sy of Flowers for Lola's Coalition. I'll introduce her later on. And Miss Sharon Cabusao-Silva from Lila, Filipina. And of course, Attorney Suarez, legal counsel of Malaya Lolas. But before we go to each one for their opening statement, I'd like to make special welcome also of a very respected Filipino historian in University of Washington, now with us, Professor Vince Rafael over there, the guy who looks like a college student. And also, welcome to the speaker's brother, Mr. Chanda Narciso Shahani, named after his lolo, the late Department of Foreign Affairs Secretary Narciso Ramos. And of course, a very courageous human rights advocate, Ms. Karen Tanyada, the grandfather of a very courageous senator also. And also thank you to Mr. Aquino Lee, representing the Wachi guerrilla organization, and plus others who are here. Our speaker is Ms. Lila Shahani. She is an expert international scientific committee for the interpretation and presentation of cultural heritage sites. Also, she served formerly in government as assistant secretary and resigned. We should ask her why. And also, university lecturer, author of recent book chapters about the Filipino comfort women and the politics of erasure. Published in Asia Pacific Journal, Japan Focus, and the essay The Commemoration, published in Routledge. She is, her grandfather was the very famous diplomat, former Foreign Affairs Secretary Narciso Ramos. Her mother was a defender of comfort women, the late Senator Leticia Ramos Shahani. Also, her uncle is a customer of Kamuning Bakery, who launched his book here In 2015, I remember with First Lady Ming Ramos, former President Fidel Ramos, her uncle. Our speaker, intellectual, she is a graduate of Brown University, also from Fletcher School of Tufts University, same school, I think, with the former Philippine ambassador to Beijing. Chita Santanabana from the same school then. And she's also a doctoral candidate at Oxford University. Let us welcome Ms. Lila Ramos Shahani for her opening statement.
Thank you so much, Wilson. Hello po, good morning everyone. I'm really honored to be here with such a distinguished panel, and Ma'am Tessie and Sharon and Virgie and of course Wilson. You know, I got interested in this topic because I was head of UNESCO at the Department of Foreign Affairs, and it was during the Duterte administration, and you know, my office was right near the Comfort Woman statue. So I would pass by it, and I was very delighted to see it. And then, you know, in the middle of the night, it was just taken down. And that was, as an assistant secretary at the Department of Foreign Affairs, I saw my colleagues say, you know, there had been no comfort women during the Japanese occupation. And to me, that was the beginning of the end. I mean, I felt, okay, I can have a great career, I can continue, but, you know, I felt it was a big insult to the comfort women. When my mother was in the Senate, rape was a crime against chastity, meaning you had to be a virgin if you wanted to complain that you had been raped. And it took her 11 years in the Senate, and the other senators would laugh at her and, you know, make jokes and sneer at her, and she would come home in tears. And I remember how hard she fought to get remuneration for the comfort women. But, you know, what I discovered in government is that you can't do anything by yourself. I mean, you need the Congress and the Senate and the executive branch to support you. So I got interested in this topic because after 3 years in the Duterte administration, I felt there were certain moral problems that could not be resolved. And what the biggest one was the comfort women issue. And I wanted to know, when the statue was taken down in the middle of the night in April of 2018, I already knew about the heritage law, and I knew that the Department of Foreign Affairs, the Department of Public Works and Highways, they have no legal prerogative to have a say on what happened to the statue. And of course, you know, it's not just this statue. There was another statue in Laguna, and of course, there is a statue in Panay, in the property of Nelia Sancho, which cannot be taken down only because it's in private property. So I was really interested in, you know, these are private funders, right? And this is public property, but the only agencies technically that have a right because the law is very clear. You cannot dismantle, you cannot deface, you cannot remove without the permission of the National Commission of Culture and the Arts. And there is no empirical data to show that NCCA was ever asked if this dismantling could have happened. And I think the most egregious part is that you know, there was a historical marker that was put, not only endorsed, but designed by the National Historical Commission, right? So you take out a marker, and so in other words, what is the meaning of Philippine law if the implementation gap is so profound, right? Because you read our Constitution, it's a very impressive Constitution. The problem is it's not, half of the laws are not implemented. So Makati City government had, Manila City government had no business keeping the marker. And then Jonas Roses, the artist, said that the statue, who I believe is here, said that the statue was stolen. But I feel that, you know, this is a problem. I mean, what's happening here, not just the erasure of that statue, but if you look at Filipino textbooks, I wrote the Department of Education, I wrote the Undersecretary for Curriculum Development, and I said, may I know how many paragraphs or pages there are in DepEd endorsed school textbooks that mention Filipino comfort women. Do you know that there's only one page in the entirety of the DepEd endorsed curriculum in the textbooks, and even in the Kasaysayan, the Filipino Encyclopedia of Philippine History, there's only a few lines. And, you know, even the Bahay na Pula with a red house where the Malaya Lolas were, you know, I was trying when I was head of UNESCO to make it a heritage site. But, you know, I worked very hard, and of course, there is the transnational nomination of the Voices of Comfort Women. And I really wanted the voices of the Filipino comfort women to be part of this global nomination, which included Korean women, Chinese women, women from all over the world. But again, you can't do it alone, and from the inside, none of my superiors were interested. Why? And that brings me to my other topic, the erasure of all of these memorials and markers. There's one 2003 marker, and that's it, officially. The erasure is informed by a political economy. That political economy has to do with money. And it's really, really sad to see that, because I was trying to trace where did the money from the 1951 San Francisco Treaty go, right? I mean, we were supposed to have received a huge amount of reparations money from the Japanese government. And so I wanted to understand what percentage of that went to social welfare, social protection. And to my dismay, I mean, I saw, you know, elite capture in the 50s that is not very different from the elite capture we see today. I mean, the majority, 89.1% of the money went into infrastructure, private sector, and a certain elite that could profit and benefit, you know, shipbuilding, you know, infrastructure. But when it comes to social protection, it was 3%, right? Now, we have to be fair in the sense that the San Francisco Peace Treaty was in 1951, and the comfort women, beginning with a Korean comfort woman, only spoke out in the 90s, right? So for the Japanese government to say, well, we already gave you money, so this is the end of the story, this is the end of the topic, it's actually, it shows a lack of understanding of post-traumatic stress disorder. Because women who have been abused and violated in a very profound way, they're not going to speak up, just because you want an answer on the spot. It took decades, and it was really because the United Nations became interested in the comfort women topic in the 90s after this Korean woman spoke up about her experiences. And then there was the beginning, a task force and radio appeal for comfort women to come out. That's the only time that Filipinas came out. Now, I think and I'm really happy that Attorney Virgie Suarez is here, because I think that she makes a valid point that, there is the comfort women who were in comfort stations, official comfort stations, during the Japanese occupation, and they fall under Lila Filipina, right? And also the Lolas Compañera. But the Malaya Lolas were really the women who came from Mapaniki and ended up in the Bahay na Pula, the Red House in Bulacan. And technically, the Red House was not a comfort station, but they were abused and raped and violated in the most terrible manner. And it's really been an insult that they're not considered to be comfort women because they were not in an official comfort station. But for all intents and purposes, as we all know, the Red House is notorious for having been a space that signals the violation of women during the Japanese occupation. And so I feel that, when the women came out in the 90s, and this was during the time of my uncle, the former President Fidel Ramos, he started a task force, and he had this work with the Asian Women's Fund in Japan. And again, to give credit to the Japanese, they did not want to admit or acknowledge, they did not want to lose face, which we understand as Asians, that's very cultural. But my mother, when she was in the Senate, she approached the Japanese Diet and the female legislators. They gave my mother money. They did not want to openly say, yes, there had been, sexual slavery, but they gave money, and that money became the basis for the TESDA Women's Center, where, women are taught skills so that they can move away from prostitution or trafficking and find gainful employment. And so what I'm saying is the agreement with the United Nations and the Asian Women's Fund in Japan and the Philippine government was that school textbooks would begin to mention the reality faced by comfort women. And I was aghast in my research to find that there's hardly any mention of this in the Japanese occupation. And this brings me to my central point, which is that in the Philippines, in my opinion, having been with UNESCO and being with the International Council of Monuments and Sites, I observe that there is a difference in the Philippines between history and heritage. And government agencies, cultural and historical agencies, only invest money in what they consider to be heritage. And there are a lot of histories that do not rise to the level of heritage in their minds, right? So what is heritage? What is legitimate heritage What qualifies for, you know, money from the legislative, budget from the executive? What qualifies? It's glorious victories or, you know, dignified defeats. But generally, it's always you're in the middle of an act and you die. And so you become heroized in the way that a Christian martyr is heroized. But you see, the problem with that is, and I understand it's coming from a space of cultural precarity. You know, we have, you know, over 100 ethno-linguistic groups. Our sense of nation really is a phenomenon of colonial entry. We were not unified. So we don't want to focus on the negative, on the ugly, on the tragic, on the shameful. We would prefer to talk about how we fought successfully against colonial powers. And I respect that. I understand that. But you see, in other countries, like in Australia, you know, they have UNESCO World Heritage Sites for where the convicts were put. They have UNESCO World Heritage Sites where the Aborigines were abused. And in South Africa, they recognize slavery, the slave trade, you know, and it's only in the Philippines, if you look at the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, it's all of these wonderful elite Catholic churches, right? And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's not this vast archipelago that we call the Philippines. It's not only Catholic in the Philippines. And so what I'm saying is all the conditions that the Philippine government promised, we were going to rewrite the history textbooks so that people remember, they were not followed. And I think today, we're always talking about amnesia and why do young people forget. Well, in my opinion, if you're only focused on the hero and you don't spend time and space on what they fought against, why they fought, then you will forget their heroism. And really, Ninoy Aquino was just an EDSA. They're just the tail end of a long struggle of people like Princess and Analea and all the people in this room who have struggled. So this brings me back to the issue of economy. Yes, you know, Japan is the biggest source of overseas development aid for the Philippines. I understand that we have to find allies against, you know, in this new fight with on the West Philippine Sea. I understand that. But having been a diplomat, I will say that you don't need to sacrifice the poor in the interests of economic gains with other countries. There are ways, and I feel that women from the lower classes, you know, people are always talking about the status of women in the Philippines, and the status of the upper middle and the middle class is very high. They're very educated, they're in the corporate, they're in government, but the lowest 20% of the Philippine population has double the fertility rate of the national average. Okay, so they have so many children, they have no rights, they have no protections, particularly if they're, you know, out of wedlock. So my point is, yes, we can have allies internationally, but there's no reason why. I mean, Japan has this desire to have a history that is entirely triumphant. But look at Germany. Germany's accepted, you know, what happened during the Second World War. There are countries like South Africa that recognize. So what I'm trying to say is, if you look at, and I'm going to end with this, if you look at what women have been honored by Philippine state institutions, you will find that heroism essentially ends after the Second World War. In other words, we don't look for heroes after that, right? Now, that is a problem, but also the women that have been recognized by agencies like the National Historical Commission are women who either fed and sheltered guerrilla fighters, so the maternal figures, or the women who were themselves fighters, right? Or the women who did both. But there are certain women, like Gregoria de Jesus, for example, who don't get honored. You know, she's the holder of the seal of the Katipunan and was herself a brilliant woman. But she doesn't get recognized. Why? Because there are allegations that she was raped. And I have found in my research that when women are sexual outside of wedlock, whether it is voluntary or forced, they are sullied in the Catholic eyes of state agencies, and there is a feeling of shame. And I feel that this shame has, the National Historical Commission put the marker there of the Comfort Woman statue in Rojas Boulevard. And then it's taken away by the Manila City government, which has no authority to do that. And the National Historical Commission and the National Commission on Culture and the Arts, they meekly look away. And they forget their own mandates. And they betray their own mandates. And so I guess what I'm saying is there are ways of being allies with other countries without necessarily sacrificing the poor. And I believe that the shame, it's almost as if the comfort women are seen as a symbol of national helplessness and shame. And I believe that they should not be ikinahihiya. On the contrary, I honor them because they survived, and they continue to survive. So I'm sorry for going on, but I ignored my notes and just thought I would talk to you. But thank you so much, Wilson. I'll end there.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lila Ramos Shahani, for very courageous and comprehensive opening statement about why she is concerned about this important topic and what we should be doing to correct the mistakes. Before I go on to our distinguished reactors, I'd like to acknowledge our the presence of a very special person who is a women's welfare and also human rights activist, also a former respected educator, Miss Princess Nemenso. She's also one of the advocates of Comfort Women. She's with the Flowers for Lola Coalition. And now more famous as the mother of the foremost mathematics intellectual and former UP Chancellor, Dr. Fidel Nemenso. Mas sikat sa inyo ngayon, ha? And also, I'd like to acknowledge, I was able to, magbilib ako kay Miss Lila Shahani, kagabi, already at night na, she messaged me, Wilson, can you invite the sculptor, Jonas Roses? Sabi ko, I'll find a way to contact him. I met him in a art gallery 1 month ago here nearby in a super duper art gallery. So I was able to invite, and masaya si Ms. Terresita Ang Sy and the other NGOs here. Mamaya baka pwede siyang tanungin nila Ms. Terresita Ang Sy. Andyan si Mr. Jonas Roses. Siya yung sculptor of the Comfort Woman statue na ninakaw in the very ignomous, very notorious way of stealing it. Later on, tatanungin natin ano nangyari, where is it. Now we'd like to invite a very well-known and respected anti-crime crusader and human rights defender also. She is with the Flowers for Lola's coalition. These are NGOs under Flowers for Lola's, helping the Comfort Women Victims cause. Let us welcome for her reaction, Ms. Terresita Ang Sy.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Tough act to follow after Lila's summary of everything that we want to say. But at least for this morning, I'd like to explain to the group why was the Flowers for Lola's campaign organized and what we have been doing. Okay, the Flowers for Lola's is an umbrella group organized when government ignominiously, as Lila said, remove the one and only statue symbolizing the unfinished struggle of women victims of Japanese wartime slavery. But because of that action of the government, many groups, like Lila Filipina, Women's Health, Malaya Lolas, Compañeras, Center Law of UP, we got together because we want and called ourselves Flowers for Lola's campaign to continue and fight for the recognition and fight for the return. Jonas, listen, fight for the return of the Comfort Women statue and give back respect, not just to the Comfort Women, give back the dignity of our nation that you step on when you succumb to Japanese pressure and remove that statue. The lead conveners of the campaign got together when the statue was removed. And it is very timely because tomorrow mark the 5th year it was put up. December 8, 2017, it was put up. And barely 4 months after, it was stealthily removed in the middle of the night. Okay? The Flowers for Lola's campaign key conveners got the chance to go around universities, campuses, civic organizations, even exclusive subdivisions to give lectures, exhibits, workshops, and conduct many other activities to teach and enlighten the public about the Comfort Women. Okay? As Lila said, not even DFA people know, because Alan Peter Cayetano was the first who said the reparation, it's a forgotten issue, it's a finished issue because reparations were already given in 1945. But it was only in 1990 when the issue came out and people knew about the Comfort Women. So this sentiment was echoed by many incumbent government officials. How uninformed and ignorant they are. Why don't they get part of the secret intelligence funds and give themselves some intelligence? It is truly shameful that we, yes, we, the Philippines, is the only country who bowed to Japanese government pressure when it demanded the removal of the statue. No other country did that, not even when they pulled out the ambassadors, Sydney, San Francisco, Korea. It's even more shameful that all over our country, we allowed Japan to put up shrines for their dead soldiers who killed, raped, tortured civilians, women, and children. Not to mention a shrine for kamikaze soldiers in Pampanga. The Flowers for Lola's campaign succeeded in stopping the plans to expand that shrine in Pampanga. It is shameless and embarrassing that our local government can do that. We can forgive, but we cannot forget our history. As Flowers for Lolas, like a million flowers, we want our advocacy to resonate with every Filipino who believes that we never should allow wars of any kind to victimize us again, and who believe that Japan has to pay for their atrocities to our Lola's victims. True peace and justice can happen only if the criminals first admit their crimes and atone for them. Yearly, we suffer, we cry because we have been losing our Lolas one after another. We are happy and comforted that the CEDAW, UN United Nations Committee, recognize our unfinished work and ask our government to do what it should have done long before this. One is and for all, take action to redress the abuse of our women, give reparations that have never been given. How could it be given when government refused to even recognize the plight of these women when they decided to come out nearly 30 years ago? So we call on the government to fulfill its treaty obligations. We have been trying to have the interagency task force on comfort women prescribed by CEDAW. We've been trying to have the government implement that. We have one meeting and it was canceled because all the other agencies, the Department of Health, DSWD, and all the other agencies said they were not ready. And then they came out with a reply to the CEDAW ignoring everything, okay? We want them to fulfill obligations under the Convention of Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women and provide just and meaningful reparations to World War II comfort women and their families. Thank you very much. Yan po ang Flowers for Lolas campaign.
Very much, Ms. Terresita Ang Sy, for your reaction statement and also reading the statement of Flowers for Lola's Coalition. Thank you very much. Before we go on with the next reactor, I'd like to make a special acknowledgement of some stalwarts of the Flowers for Lola's Coalition who are here. Dr. Tan Cho Chong over there at the back, who has been rendering free medical attention and help to the survivors, comfort women survivors. Also, Mr. Aquino Lee over there. Thank you for your helping Flowers for Lola's Coalition. Next, we'd like to invite for her reaction, Ms. Sharon Cabusao-Silva is the Executive Director of Lila, Filipina, the NGO helping comfort women survivors and victims for decades. Welcome for your reaction statement.
Good morning, everyone. Magandang umaga po sa ating lahat. And welcome, Lila Shahani, whom I have heard in one of the webinars that was organized by an organization. And she gave a really very wonderful perspective on the issue of history, remembrance, and justice for victims of wars of aggression. So actually, May 2nd, there's a second anniversary that's coming up also on the last week of December. This is the second statue that was removed by the government, by the Philippine government on December, I think 28, around 2018. This was the replica of the Girl of Peace statue, the one that they have in South Korea in front of the Japanese embassy. So there was a project then in 2018 between the city government of San Pedro, Laguna, and Jecheon City in South Korea, which put up this replica of the Girl of Peace in a private facility that was ironically owned by a South Korean Christian organization. But when a Japanese journalist came to know about it, and she was very excited to report it, and I think the Japanese embassy got wind of it, on around December 31 or January 1 of 2019, while everybody everybody, while the whole world was having their own festivities, New Year festivities, a team from the city government of San Pedro Laguna came to that facility and had the statue removed. Lila Filipina went there just before the COVID pandemic struck, no, in 2020, hoping to negotiate with the mayor of San Pedro at the time. But they said that the statue was in a private warehouse. They would not tell us where, and they would not tell us what their plans are for the statue, because we were thinking of, you know, if they don't want the statue anymore, we can have it and look for a second home. In fact, we have already prepared a second home for the first statue that went missing. And if you go to Baclaran Church now, you will see that the pedestal where the statue was supposed to have been installed in 2019 remains empty. Okay. So, like what Ms. Tessia said before, we also have a desaparecida, a missing person, in the form of 2 comfort women statues in the Philippines. Okay, so I would like to talk about the issue or question of justice as it pertains to the comfort women. No? I think it's very, very important to be talking about remembrance and justice that accompanies or when we talk about colonialism or wars of occupation. Because normally, as history has shown, in all parts of the world, whenever wars of occupation happen, usually kasunod na yung usapin ng decolonization or deconstruction or historical revision or historical erasures of knowledge and historical facts among the people who were occupied and also consequently in the international community. I think I would like to raise 3 points when we talk about justice, no? As far as the comfort women are concerned. Of course, it also means justice as it should be rendered to individual victims and aggrieved nations. In the case of the Filipino comfort women, edi itong mga lola natin at saka itong ating bansang Pilipinas na nilusob ng mga Hapon noon. Yung pangalawa, justice, which also means preservation of historical references for purposes of memorialization and understanding. So kasama dyan dapat yung pagtuturo nitong issue ng Filipino comfort women sa ating mga eskwelahan. Ang paglalagay nito or putting this issue in historical references so that the young people would know about it. And the third, I think, which is equally important, is justice as how it should compel changes or reforms in national laws and international laws, and how it should guide foreign policies of nations. No? Halimbawa, nabanggit na ni Lila kanina, o ni Ms. Shahani kanina, ni Lila, yung usapin ng, sa atin kasi, here in the Philippines, we are really at a disadvantaged position when it comes to negotiating with Japan. Because Japan remains as the #1 creditor country. It's a very powerful country, and it is even more becoming powerful now with the reinvigoration of the US-Japan-Philippine military alliance in the Philippines. It's very important that issues of history and historical justice be a guiding principle in the foreign relations of nations, simply because, number one, we do not want a repeat of that experience or anything similar happening to the country or to the country that was occupied. Sa kaso ng Pilipinas, we Lila Filipina, and I suppose all my other colleagues here, and I suppose everyone, no? Everyone who values peace and democracy and social justice are very worried about the threats of wars that the Philippines is facing again, not only in terms of the West Philippine Sea, no? But also in terms of, I just read the other day that the US is planning to transfer or deploy missile technology, missile deployment systems, or whatever they call it, to Asia. Pag Asia, dalawa lang naman yan. It's either Japan, well, it can be Australia, Japan, or the Philippines. So these are the very destructive missiles, I think, that we are seeing now that's killing thousands of Palestinian peoples, and they are going to bring that technology here, I suppose, to the Philippines, because that was part of the several-year missile technology program in which Japan plays a leading role, and I think where the U.S. is playing a huge role as a funder of the development of that program. So I think that was also the basis for Japan hastening or trying to hasten the adoption of the mutual access agreement or arrangement with the Philippine Congress. Prime Minister Kishida was here last December to urge Philippine Congress to adopt, to hasten yung mutual access arrangement in violation of the Philippine Constitution that requires congressional concurrence in cases of adoption of treaties or military arrangements with other nations. So I think that was the basis for yung pagmamadali nila, no? And this is very, very something that really concerns us, no? Something that really worries even the lolas when you speak to them. Kasi ito ngang recent, kausap namin si Lola Narcisa Claveria, kinukwento niya, napakahirap talaga ng may gera, sabi niya. Ma-imagine nyo ba, kasi we were talking about the Palestinian children who were, you know, so desperate to find water dun sa Gaza. Tapos sabi niya, kami nga noong World War II, ma-imagine mo yung cow manure, no? It forms a circle, and when it rains, there's a pool of water that forms in the middle. And that's what we drank nung World War II, nung walang tubig. So it's a very simple story, but talagang something that really hits you when you hear it, and something that I think should motivate everyone now to, one, not just fight for justice for Filipino comfort women and other victims of military sexual violence of Japanese aggression, but also to defend and fight against the wars of aggression and also to defend the sovereignty of the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Sharon Cabusao-Silva, for your statement. Coincidence pala, Lila Filipina tsaka our speaker Lila has the same name. Coincidence. Last but not the least, to give a reaction and her statement, would like to invite the very fearless lawyer who is legal counsel not only of the Malaya Lolas, but also of many oppressed people in Philippine society through the years, including those killed by some American soldiers. You were also the defender. Let us welcome Attorney Virginia Suarez, legal counsel of Malaya Lolas, the Comfort Women Group of Pampanga. Welcome.
Magandang umaga sa ating lahat, no? In reaction to Lila's discussion, very comprehensive discussion, I have to focus on three things. One, about the Malaya Lolas. Second, about Japan. And third, about the wars, no? One, it's November 23, 1943. It's been 80 years. It was a siege of Mapanike. It was a Japanese occupation of Mapanike. And when there is a war, there's always land occupation. And when there is occupation of land, there is always an occupation of women bodies. There is patriarchy even at times of war. All the more it is evident at times of war, where women bodies are being used to weaken the enemy, when women and children are simply being considered as collateral damage. And we still see that nowadays, considering the many wars that are happening in different parts of the world. There is already a CEDAW resolution saying that our government is responsible, accountable, liable for the Malaya Lolas and all other victims of Japanese occupation. And that is very clear. The responsibility, the liability, the accountability of the Philippine government is distinct and separate from the liability of the Japan being the perpetrator, being the state perpetrator. But of course, I mean, the Lolas are all Filipino citizens and therefore under the protection of our government. This government should represent the Lolas, should take the case, the cause of the Lolas against Japan. The CEDAW view already emphasized that our government should ensure reparation for the Lolas, should ensure rehabilitation of the Lolas, should ensure the inclusion of the stories of the Japanese occupation, the stories of our Lolas in the curriculum. As already emphasized by Lila earlier, there's only one page in the many history books, and yet there are so many Lolas raped, victimized during the Japanese occupation. When I say there is patriarchy, especially during war, this is because even in the Philippines, there are so many women who contributed during the revolution in defending our nation, in defending our freedom, and yet their contributions are being hidden, their contributions are not being written, their contributions are not being discussed, even in our history books. Now the Lolas, another point of the CEDAW resolution is that about the Bahay na Pula. Now, to make it as a memorial or for the government to ensure or to choose a different area just to ensure that there is a museum or memorial. All these things remain to be executed. So, it's been 80 years and the injustice continues. As I said to Lila, it is already frustrating that the Japanese government has continuously denied justice to our Lolas, but all the more that it is frustrating that our very own government is not doing anything for the Lolas. The Lolas do not need piecemeal solutions. You know, of course, DSWD has been doing something, but that is far from executing the CEDAW view or the CEDAW resolution. So let us stop the injustice now. Let us continue to discuss this. Because the Lola's only request is that that we remember them, that we do not forget them, because if we continue to remember them, there is that great possibility that it will never happen again. But if we forget them, if that means forgetting also our history and the possibility of having another generation of the Lolas, we do not want that. Second, about Japan. Japan has been consistent in trying to erase the history of the military sexual slavery, the history of the comfort women system in Japan. They continuously put up kamikaze soldiers. They are, and they have been, opposing any construction of a comfort women statue in different parts of the world. And as already mentioned by Terresita Ang Sy, the same happened in the Philippines. Now Japan is very much, Japan has not yet resolved its crimes, its war crimes. despite the clear findings of the Tokyo Tribunal as early as 1991. Japan is guilty of war crimes. Japan is guilty of crimes against humanity. And yet Japan is now very aggressive insofar as its partnership with US. And let us not forget, Japan is now trying to negotiate with the Philippines another VFA-like. And they call it the Military Access Agreement with the Philippines. Let us not forget Jennifer Laude when we talk about VFA. And now here, Japan is negotiating another VFA-like. We do not want another Nicole. We do not want another Jennifer Laude. We do not want another Lolas. And therefore, we do not want this military access agreement because that means making Japan even more aggressive here in the Philippines, like the US. And then third point about wars. When we talk about the Lolas, let us not forget that there are many wars in different parts of the world. Let us not forget the Palestinians. Let us not forget the children of Gaza. Remember when the Lolas were raped. Now we call them Lolas, but when they were raped, they were children. In Gaza, children are simply being killed. Now that we are celebrating Human Rights Day, but in Gaza, the entire human rights are being denied from these children. And Japan, US are very much involved. All the arms, all the bombs, killing all these children are made from US. Remember, Japan remains to be the #1 when it comes to arms trading. So when we stand up for the Lolas, we are actually standing up against all wars and militarization. Marami pong salamat. Magandang umaga.